Alright, welcome everybody. We are here for a second video with DecodeChess, talking about the importance of using engines and how to use them right, and what kind of relevance they can have for chess players. So what I'd like to do here is briefly speak about a game that I played in 2009. So this was at my first ever GM Norm round robin. This was the first Saturday tournament in Hungary, and I had started off 2-0, but I lost a tough game in round 3, and that's what we're going to look at. So the importance of engines. I think any chess player who's not using engines is really doing themselves a disservice if they're trying to really improve. But I think you can do yourself an even bigger disservice if you use engines wrong. And so these machines are, as we saw in the first video, they're much stronger than any human can be. But in order to learn from them, it's not just enough to just sort of look at how they play and think that will sort of rub off on you. So, for example, here in this game with Ilincic, I remember checking some opening. This game started off as a Grunfeld. And what we'll see here on DecodeChess, much like we saw on other sites, is that they have this little option here. This is, as you can see, it's a little fish. That is run a simple chess engine analysis using Stockfish. And so this game started off as a Grunfeld. And you'll find that if you look at, for example, this position here, Stockfish will almost certainly say that the best move is c5. And it does. And I had prepared that properly. I just sort of memorized what to play with c5 next. And then after d5, you'll see that Stockfish is going to say e6 is the best move. And what I had done was I had just prepared throughout this game how I'm supposed to play this position. And essentially, I memorized the moves that Stockfish gave until I believed the position was equal. And that's certainly something you can do to try to get a reasonable position out of the opening. And getting a reasonable position out of the opening is a big part of chess. But what we're going to see here is the limitations of this. So if we keep going forward, we're going to go all the way here. And if you look at this point, if I run Stockfish it here, it's going to say the best move is e takes d5, followed by bishop f5. And as we can see, minus 0.13, that's basically just equal. It's pretty clear that black has a totally acceptable position at this point. It seems like a reasonable Benoni structure. But what the shortcoming of this was, and how it doesn't help you, is that after e takes d5, and bishop f5, around here I was starting to play on my own. And up to here I knew I was doing fine. Like if you look at the Stockfish evaluation, it's teetering it right around equality. Fair enough. But after bishop e3, my next move was queen d7, which was probably fine. And then after queen d2, there came this move, bishop h3. And as you can see here in Decode, it's color-coded differently. It sort of says everything up to here in black is either theory or just a decent move. And here, if you look at what the computer will say, it says the best move is rook fe8, or I think it gives rook ac8 is fine too. You can give it in either move order. Perhaps queen d7 wasn't perfect, but it was fine. Realistically here, playing a move like rook ac8, which not only bolsters the c5 pawn, but also once we've played c4 means that this knight on a6, who's black's sort of one bad piece, can prepare to come to c5. And once we've played c4, we will not have to worry about bishop takes b6, followed by a takes b6, and then knight takes c4, because the rook on c8 is well placed. So a move like rook ac8 would make perfect sense, both to free the knight on a6 to, in theory, go to b4, as well as potentially prepare c4 later. Additionally, the move rook fe8 also makes sense, activating a rook to a nice open file. But what does not make sense is the move I played, which is bishop h3. And if you can see here, it clearly doesn't like that. So Stockfish's evaluation at this moment was at around 0.19. And then here it goes, it will, if we ask it, it jumps up quite a bit to 0.8 or so. So that basically is telling me that this move bishop h3 was a clear mistake. Now, and at reasonably high depths, the computer seems to really think that white's advantage is noticeable, when on the previous move, black was quite fine. And DecodeChess has color-coded that for me very nicely, which is good. But it doesn't tell you why bishop h3 is a mistake. Now, looking at it now, it makes sense to me. I believe that this bishop on f5 is a better piece than the bishop on g2, because it's controlling the squares d3 and c2, which could, in theory, mean the knight on a6 has something of a future coming to b4. Furthermore, the bishop on g2 is blocked in by his own pawn, and the only real thing that bishop on g2 is doing until white plays d6, which will be hard to pull off, is defending his king. But if you think about my odds of launching some kind of kingside attack with my knights on a6 and b6, it's simply not going to happen. So here, I was very surprised that bishop h3 was such a bad move. I remember that at the time. I mean, I was a very young player. I was 18, I guess, and certainly not nearly as mature as I am now, and I didn't really understand the game that well at the time. But I sort of took it to heart that bishop h3 was a mistake. But then the question becomes, you understand that the engine is pointing out what your mistake is, but the question is, what role will engines play in then eliminating that mistake from future games? And here, I don't think that I really learned my lesson particularly well. Basically, what I did was I just never played this opening very much anymore. I found some other line against the fianchetto system, which you could just say is, well, bypass the problem. But in general, I think this was a gap in my understanding. And while I understood that the computer was telling me it was wrong, I didn't quite understand why or what to do to improve. And this is where the shortcomings of engines really come in. If you think about what I did here, working with the computer got me through the opening and got me to a reasonable position, but it didn't actually teach me to play the resulting position any better. I was totally fine, but then when I played bishop h3 and white took it, and now this d-pawn was free to make trouble, already here I think black is clearly worse, and the position went south really fast. Rook fd8 was probably not the best, but already here the position strikes me as very difficult, and after knight cb5 and rook ac1, all of a sudden my pieces are all hanging, and you know, this is exactly the kind of position, like, wait, why did I spend all this time? Because not only did I play bishop h3, I brought my queen to h3 and then back to d7. It didn't really seem to help my position very much. And next thing you know, I get completely crushed after knight c8, rook fd1, bishop f8. Knight c7 came, which was a nice way to finish the game. And here, Stockfish can point that out to you. It'll just say knight c7 wins, and there's not too much calculation to even be done. We can see that if I take twice on c7, the rook on d8 will hang at the end. So it really helps a lot to have something like Decode just explain in more human terms why a move is a mistake. Because here I really think I failed to learn my lesson back then. I said, okay, bishop h3 is wrong, but why? Well, I don't know. And then next thing you know, you're going to make a similar mistake in the future. So here it says bishop takes h3 is the best move. It threatens and lures the black's queen to h3 and vacates d7. So this is exactly what you see. When it says lures the black queen and allows d7, bishop h3, queen h3, d6, and this is exactly how the game went, and soon my queen had to come back to d7. So Decode just predicted this perfectly. If we go back to this moment here, rook ac8 is beneficial because it intends to play knight b4. This is exactly what we're talking about. Rook ac8 is better than alternatives. It intends to play knight b4, as we can see. Rook ac8, we want to go knight b4, and this pawn now on c5 is not hanging. And it supports the pawn on c5, and we can say knight b4. This is largely along the same lines, but you really need to understand why the engine is telling you what the best move is, and I think that's why you often want to wait a little bit in your development before you start using engines seriously. But yeah, I thought this was a very interesting game from some time back. You know, obviously it's a little painful to look over and, you know, see some game where I got completely crushed, but I think it shows how using engines in this game would have been helpful for me, how it affected me as a player early on, where I was using them to memorize moves, and that got me a good position out of the opening, which is certainly important, but it's not the only relevant thing. And then sort of showing how, as a player today, I would learn from what the computer had to say about the mistakes I made as a younger player. In any case, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you for the next video.